Welcome, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to the hand of God. I was just over on Inquiry. Oh, a lot of times I think I want to keep sitting and then I get the urge to stand. I really don't like sitting. I'm not a sitting person. Once again, my name is CHIMAOGE. Government name, CHIMAOGE Chijioke eBay. My given name, of course, is CHIMAOGE. Other names for me include Moge and Inquiry, but you know, I would respond more to Moge than Inquiry, and I'll say it like that this time. Anyway, welcome here, where I go more in depth into previously expressed ideas. Today, I'm going to be talking about not throwing away, or as I said, discarding information that comes from spirits, okay? And let me get right into it. Thank you to those of you who are watching this on replay. Thank you to those of you who are watching it live. And thank you to those of you who are coming over from Inquiry, where I just gave an emergency message, okay? I am out of food, please. Patronize me with more urgency. That's what I'll start saying so that I can get some food. I need food to survive. I am a human being. I am not God. Anyway, just because I'm not God doesn't mean I'm special. And this doesn't mean I am not special. And this leads me in to our topic. And this is one I've been wanting to get out in isolation for a while. Kabranam no go ha. Greeting. My matrilineage hails from Ebem or Hafia. Yesterday, I criticized my matrilineage heavily. I maintain those criticisms, but I want to be clear. I'm not talking about every single ancestor from my matrilineage. That criticism was focused on the living. And yes, I know there are living people in my matrilineage I have not met. I'm sure many of you are good. It's just most of the ones I've met, and quite frankly, most of the ones I know for sure exist, are not good. And some of the rest of you, you might be a net positive, but to me, you have been a net negative, okay? Just because you're a net positive overall doesn't mean that you have not been a net negative to other individuals. So please become more positive. Anyway, so I bring this message from my ancestors. Kabunam no go. I'm just thinking. Anyway, let me begin. You've often heard me say, Abumun Yishi Kalakana. I am the boss of the male who overcame sin. I am the head of the greatest man alive. How do I know that? Part of the way I know that is from the spirit. Many people in the world today will discount that because they have a twisted understanding of what the spirit is. And that stems from having a twisted understanding of what life is. Because guess what? Life is the love of the spirit's life. They work hand in hand. If you don't understand life, you will not understand the spirit. And this is one thing about life. Life is not perfect. Why am I saying this? People have a belief in the perfect source. And I'm going to start with the concept of the perfect living investigator. People have sources who are alive, who look at other things in life and tell them something about it. And they want to believe that those sources are perfect. That does not exist. That does not exist. There is no perfect person. Therefore, there is no perfect life. And because there is no perfect person or perfect life, there is no such thing as a perfect living examiner. Let me give you an example. And I will give an example. Let me think. Because the hand of God is me giving out my rough drafts, basically. My rough draft's pretty good. Anyway, let me give because you see, I have some personal examples I want to give, but I don't know if I'm ready to give them yet. I'm just gonna give, let me figure out what example to give. No, I won't give a personal example. Let me think of this example. Okay, let me create a scenario. Perhaps I'll be able to give in a personal example coming up. Somebody says that they saw an eagle. Somebody says that they saw an eagle by the river. You don't believe that person. You tell someone else you trust. Maybe you trust them because you like the suit they're wearing. Not logical, but you like the suit they're wearing. You tell that person with the suit, can you go down by the river and see if there's an eagle? The person goes down to the river, comes back and says, I didn't see an eagle there, therefore there was no eagle. Now let me fill you in on this scenario. The eagle was actually there. This is the problem. 2 peas in a pod created a crab. What does that mean? You see, that animal, the crab, which is, the soil is an animal. It can be a symbol of ignorance. Not always. The soil can be good, but it can be a symbol of ignorance. And let me just leave that there. That's just a metaphor and euphemism I'm using. Now, these 2 peas in a pod, who are they? The person who first heard about the eagle, not the person who saw it, and the suit person. The suit person is the biggest problem because they are an authority in the mind of the first pea, and they do not take that authority seriously. The suit person behaved very stupidly. First of all, you should have first asked P1. You should have asked that first pea in the pod. Why do you not ask the person who told you about the eagle more? By the time I get to the river, well, and then they should have stopped and said, okay, they said they saw an eagle. You're asking them whether or not they saw an eagle at that time. You have to evaluate what was happening at that time. If I were to go in my suit, and I want to add this, a sensible person is probably not wearing a suit and going down by the river, but we have such people in the world today. If I go down now in my suit, that is a different time, and I'm not examining evidence that came from that time. Therefore, this is a non sequitur. So that person failed the first test because they actually went to the river. Secondly, they assumed that because they did not see an eagle by the river that time, it was not there earlier. And I think I'll put this example to the side because I don't want to get too spiritual. Because at some point, if you're making up a scenario, it gets spiritual after a while. But I'm just giving that example to, 1, ground the thought a bit. Because yes, the spirit can ground you in this life. And 2, begin your thought process. What kind of things am I talking about? I'm talking about reckless doubt. You see, the first pea in the pod exhibited reckless doubt, and that is what happens a lot. And this reckless doubt goes hand in hand with believing that someone in a suit automatically is a perfect source. This is crazy. That is not how life works. To evaluate the truth in this life, you must understand time and place. And you must also understand ability. And that's another thing I want to talk about. Not everyone has the same eyesight. And just because 2 people's eyesight is different doesn't mean one is better than the other. Although there are many cases where someone's eyesight is overall better than someone else's eyesight, okay? It could be different. For example, some people are able to see fine details, but are not able to understand what they're seeing when they see the overall picture. Some people are the opposite. So in order to evaluate what someone else has seen, you have to understand their ability to see. And you cannot just be what I'll call a modern day oddball who thinks that ability is just raw strength. Ability is not just about how high you can jump. It's also about how you look when you jump and how fit you are when you jump. Side note, modern athletics is broken because we do not require athletes to be fit. What am I saying? We think that if an athlete dunked a ball in the hoop, for example, they did well, even if they injured themselves. If an athlete cannot dunk without injuring themselves, they should not be dunking. And maybe they should not be playing. The point of what we call athletics, sports, and yes, I've been on the record and I'll say this again, sport, life, same thing. Those things we call sport are life on a smaller level. Evidence for this, in what we call Latin, the term spore refers to life, okay? English is not a proper language. We don't properly understand all languages of the past, but many of the building blocks we have are correct, okay? And in order to evaluate these, we do also need the help of spirit. Anyway, that was an aside. What am I getting at here? Many people do not know how to evaluate evidence from the living. And then they try to evaluate evidence from the deceased. Kabrunam no goha. Kabrunam no goha. Kabrunam no goha. I have to tackle it square on. We live in a world where secularism and consequently atheism reigns supreme. That is the standard by which people evaluate things. If I assume that spirits do not exist, if I assume that the entity called God does not exist, and if I assume that that paradigm which I am using is logical, what do I see? That is a shelihe. That is a thing characteristic of the sheep. The one who is always looking at the wrong thing. And sometimes if you are unable to see anything, that is a form of looking at the wrong thing. Because at the end of the day, you have seen nothing. And in a way, nothing is something. What am I saying here? People start with the assumption that spiritual information is just there for their pleasure. So if you want to be serious, you get rid of it. But this creates a culture of what I will call deviancy. What does this mean? There are people who want to live in what they call their pleasure all the time. And this brings me to addressing the second school of people I revile. I will call them religious people. Why do I revile religious people as well? Because they're not serious. And the way you can tell they're not serious is that they either become secular when they are forced to, and I use force with air quotes, or they do not engage with the dominant paradigm at all. And this is a mistake, because again, I said this over on Inquiry, I'll say it here. There is no such thing as a person that is always right, but there is always also no such thing as a person who is always wrong. What does that mean? The secular people I revile are also sometimes right. What am I saying? They still have eyes and ears. I'm not saying they're using them properly, but because they have eyes and ears, every once in a while, they see things that exist. And they're busybodies. They're looking into too many things. They're not looking into the proper things, but they're looking into too many things. So even though maybe they only understand 5% of what they see, because of everything they've looked at, they've assembled what is known as an afal, a stomach, a soil, a conglomeration of stuff that must be evaluated. Because of their supremacy, we must evaluate what they've brought to us in order to go forward. But we should not evaluate it using their eyes and ears, because they have made themselves limited, because they have not asked themselves one very basic question. What if quote-unquote spirits exist? What if quote-unquote God exists? And third, along with that, they've not asked themselves, what if this paradigm I'm using to evaluate things is not correct? Let me address the issue of paradigms. What am I saying when I'm saying their paradigm does not make sense? That paradigm that they've used assumes, one, that they've categorized the thing known as spirits correctly, and two, that the entity known as God is important. You see, throughout my life, and I'll say throughout my adulthood, okay, because I'm not counting what happened when I was a child, and I'll leave it at that for now. That's deep, because people obsess too much over their childhood thoughts. But throughout my adult life, I've seen people ask the question whether or not God exists, and I really tune it out, because God is just one entity. Why are you obsessed with one entity? They're so obsessed with that one entity that they think that a whole host of other entities are necessarily tied to its existence. What do I mean? The common idea of God is a quote-unquote supreme being who rules over everything and has no equal in any sense. The implications of that is that this person loves no one and is on no one's level. Because at the end of the day, you cannot properly love someone if they're not your equal on any level. And I'm going to leave it at that for now, but think about all the things I talk about. People assume that, for example, their child is not their equal on any level. Tell that to your child too many times, and you will have another family fight. And I'll end it at that. And yes, that's even if they're 1 year old. People also, and I don't even like looking at this one, but it's prevalent. People often assume that their romantic partner is not their equal on any level. Hey. You see, certain things are unspeakable. And because of that, I'll just leave that there. And I encourage you, if you see someone thinking too hard about these things, gather and evaluate them. You just might have a moral criminal. But anyway, forgive me. Anyway, the unspeakable is exploded. What am I saying here? Let me hone in on my point. Deviations happen. That doesn't mean they're bad, but sometimes you have to retool. Again, this is my rough draft. So, what am I saying here? The concept of God. When people start to put overimportance on the concept of God, they don't evaluate the concept of spirits, because they think that God is all spirits at once or something and everything. And therefore, when trying to decide whether or not to be honest and say, should I trust that dream I had about that person? Should I trust that dream where my deceased great-grandfather appeared to me and said, don't take that job, it's bad for your health? When they're thinking of whether or not to be honest, when they're even doing simple things like saying, should I trust my quote-unquote gut feeling that tells me not to go into the woods at night because I'm hearing an owl go, hoo, hoo, and I have a feeling there are ghosts in there. Side note, I think that when I really assess my thoughts, I've always believed in things like ghosts, and that's because I just don't do certain things. A lot of weird stories I hear about people I could not fathom. Going into the woods at night by oneself, or generally speaking, as someone in my category of life, going into the woods, because guess what? Just because Neptune can do it doesn't mean my category of life can do it comfortably. If there's an emergency, if a superhero movie erupts, I might think about it. But you will not see me in the woods at night. You will also not see me going into a lonely house at night or even during the day, because I'll be honest, those things are haunted. Anyway, but I don't even go there. What is that? And you know what? I'll go one further. I think the way we design houses in the West attracts evil spirits. That's why everybody has those things you call wasps making their home in the corner, because they're warning us this thing is dangerous. But anyway, that's a form of kalakana, ugonta, the small eagle. I know some people, my language now, call it ebe. Think about it. Ebe, big. I'm not a big person, but think of what's going on there. Think of what it does. Think of how high it flies. Think of what it can do. Anyway. My point is that we need to design houses differently. I'll even join on this place I'm in. That corner up there is not official. Corners attract evil spirits. But anyway, what am I saying here? When people are thinking about whether or not to be honest, they don't just lay everything out, because as soon as you do that, you have to say, okay, I have to abandon secularism, because there are too many other possibilities for you to just jump in the secular corner and say, none of this exists. So you think that entity God is so important that you have to spend time asking whether or not he exists. And when you do that, you forget you should be asking, what is this entity even like? And consequently, you don't ask what spirits are and what are they like. And this is my next question. What is a spirit? To be honest, I am not totally sure what the strict definition of a spirit is. I'll give you an example. When you're seeing a video of me, is that a life or a spirit? Can you touch the video of me? This live stream broadcast, can you touch it? My voice, is that a life or is it a spirit? Try it. Touch my voice. This voice can live on after I have reached 300,000 years of age. Is it a life or is it a spirit? These are basic philosophical questions. So if you ask me to define what a spirit is, I'll react the same way as if you ask me what the meaning of life is. Another question that I quite frankly find meaningless. That is like being on the soccer field and in the middle of the game asking what is the point of scoring. I don't know. Anyway, let me get to the number. Let me get to the beef here. What am I really saying? People throw out spiritual information too much. And this is where I'm going to start to talk up here. Because again, if I was giving a lecture about the sun, I wouldn't spend all day defining it. Even if I don't know what the strict definition is, I've seen it. Let's talk about spirits. Be intelligent. When I'm saying spiritual information, when I'm talking about information that came from prayer, when I say I can hear my ancestors, what do you think I mean? Are you assuming that I hear my ancestors the same way I hear my voice now? Do you think I think my ancestors are still alive like that? At least all of them. I don't know. There's some very old people that might have evaded us, especially on other planets. But anyway, but really to reach the common level of seriousness, obviously, like the great masses of my ancestors are not alive. Okay, not like that. So if I tell you, for example, hey, I just talked to my grandmother who passed away, and assuming you're someone I've told my spiritual philosophy about, do you think that I believe the life came back like Jesus? No. I'm saying I prayed and I heard from her. And if you're going into the details of that, you need to leave the field for a second. Because people do not evaluate spiritual information properly, a lot of people get hurt unjustly, both directly and indirectly. People who get hurt directly are people who are brave enough to literally just talk about spirits without using cult protocol. Because religions give us cult protocol, and many branches of secularism also give us cult protocol. I'll give an example for each. I'll give the harder example first. Maybe you have a friend group. You have a group of people who refer to themselves as friends. And this friend group has a habit of debating philosophy. And the friend group is dominated. Say maybe there's 10 people. Or no, maybe I'll say 5. That's more normal, I think. There's a friend group of 5 that is dominated by 2 personalities. Then you have 2 other personalities who always act like they agree with them. And then you have 1 person who is what is known as the uzo. That is the person who's being held down by the friend group. Why is he in the friend group? Let's say mommy and daddy told him to hang out with these people when he was 5, and now he's 20 and it's still going on. Anyway, the friend group has become a cult, and the cult is sure that maybe God exists. I'm giving them variation, but spirits do not. Why are they sure of this? Because they've never seen a spirit. So, because of the nature of that friend group, the uzo, the one who's being stepped on, nabe, the uzala, there's a lot of duality in those terms and those things. Shout out to nabe, but hopefully the worldly version, the father of the prison cry, the good husband of the people. Anyway, the uzo can only talk about spirits by saying, what if it existed? Even though every once in a while he prays and he hears from his ancestors. And I'll leave that example at that. So because of that, that person cannot talk freely because he's just beholden to this little cult. Then let me give a second example, and this one is more real. Let's just look at an evangelical church. The evangelical church gives people cult protocols for talking about spirits. So before you say anything spiritual, you have to say, God, and Jesus. Woo! Yes! Holy Ghost, fire! Holy Ghost. So if you don't do that and then say, praise the Lord, praise the living God, before you speak of spirits, they'll throw too much holy water on you. So, what am I saying here? No one can properly speak in those environments now. And that is because they cannot talk honestly about their spiritual information. This is a big problem. And because of that, getting to the title of this rough draft, spiritual information gets discounted, even in serious situations. And I'm gonna just keep using the example of finding work. 1, because it's relatable and relatively uncontroversial, even though I think people think it's controversial. 2, again, I'm still very mad at my family members and their collaborators who, like my dad's younger brother, Magnus eBay, would see me on the way to work and tell me I had to get a job. Did he know what he was seeing? What is his seeing capacity? Anyway, the whole point of this is this. A lot of people might, for example, be trying to quote-unquote find a job. And because of the nature of these environments, they cannot take into account things like dreams, seeing so-called angel numbers, and things of that nature. If you're in group 1, you have to pretend that didn't exist, because as soon as you bring it up, they'll show you a video of one philosopher telling you that because you didn't see a spirit flying out your window like a bird or whatever, it doesn't exist. And then if you're in situation 2, because it wasn't Jesus, my Lord, you have to ignore it. And then you also have people who bounce between these 2 groups, and I just look at these people, it's not logical. Then you have another group of people I want to introduce. These are the people who overdo spirituality. What does that mean? I'm talking about how I don't have food here now. Look at this cookie I have here. I'm grateful it exists because I can eat it and I get something. Is this my whole meal? No. But we have a trend of over-spiritual people who believe things like you don't need to eat or whatever because the spirit will provide. God will deposit manna from heaven into your head and it'll reach the stomach. Better. Again, based on what's on the package, actually let me wait. Let me continue because I think I've mostly chewed it. Fun fact, I'm trying my hardest not to eat hard foods or when a food is only available in hard form to break it down just to ease strain on my teeth. I would advise everyone to do things like that because just because you have teeth doesn't mean you should make them do all the work, okay? But Anyway, I was just saying, according to the package, that one cookie has 55 calories. 55 calories alone won't give me everything I need, but it is something, right? So, you have maybe secular individuals who might tell me there's actually, how should I divide up this example? Again, this is a rough draft, but you're getting information. Anyway, um, so let's see. What I'm talking about, people who are too into the spirit. Okay, let me say it like this: you might have people who ignore spirit, who say that okay, there's 55 calories there, and because you have 55 calories, you or what am I trying to say? Because you've only had 55 calories, you're gonna be feeling unwell the next hour. That's not necessarily true. Okay, if you pray or something, you can push through for the next hour. But that's an emergency protocol, right? And again, I'm talking as someone who's low on food. But then you have people who are low on the spirit who say, 55? The number Jesus gave you was 2. Only eat 2 calories, brother. Or maybe you have the brother on the corner saying, you're not meant to worship the eagle. The number of the eagle is 55. Don't eat that cookie, brother. Anyway, what am I saying? I can't help it. Basically, we have people who are so consumed by the spirit in the bad way that they ignore life and they go, because the thought appeared in my head, or because I had a dream and this is what I wrote in my notebook after I woke up. This is the truth, and they just go ahead with it even though it's ridiculous. And I'm just highlighting this for a serious reason. One negative trend I've seen in so-called spiritual spaces is just not okay. So I think there are a lot of people who don't think they have to eat. It's just something I've seen. That's bad. Again, eat enough food, okay? I know a lot of health guidelines, and I'm always careful when giving out health information. Give models of what to eat based on a 2,000 calorie diet. Again, everyone should tailor their diet, but I'm just saying that that's a good model to begin looking at when optimizing, and obviously talk with healthcare professionals to optimize your diet. But as again, you shouldn't. I mean, there's emergency protocols now if for some reason you're isolated, but it is not ideal to be optimizing your diet by yourself, okay? But anyway, what's the point I'm making here? Basically, we live in a world where people operate in extremes, and both extremes come from not using spiritual information properly. Either you completely ignore it, or you take it completely in without evaluating it. And I'll be honest, some of that information you think is spiritual is just purely physical. Okay, maybe you felt a feeling when you looked at the river and you decided to invent a story consciously or subconsciously to justify it. And when you talk to people, you're talking about, how the latest Bible verse or whatever you're looking at told you had to wear these robes and be on the corner, and if you're on the corner for a month, you become a millionaire, something like that. That's nonsense. Yeah. Anyway, what am I saying here? I'll wrap up, then I'll take a break, and then you'll have the remontada, the Biazzo, or Cuco remontada, or Cuco de Biazzo, the light echo returns. Anyway, what am I saying here? In order to properly operate, we have to evaluate spiritual information with the same relative weight And I want to emphasize relative weight as physical information. What does that mean? To the extent you've seen the information, take it seriously. And taking something seriously does not always mean doing what the source is telling you to do with the information. Just give it attention. What does this mean? If you're trying to evaluate, for example, whether or not something happened, you have to go, okay, what did people see? What did people feel in this life? And then what did people feel and see in the other life? And then say, how much information do we have on each side? How deeply have we seen the information? How deeply have we felt the information? Unite them and then make a decision about what to do based upon your evaluation of what happened. And I'll leave it at that. That is the proper way to act. You should not just go and assume that only what you think your eyes have seen is the truth. That is illogical. And I'll leave you with this one statistic. About 28% of people worldwide, at the very least in the US, but I'll go out and say it, I believe this statistic was also replicated worldwide. This is a study. I'll find the exact study in the future. I've mentioned it before. About 28% of people believe they can communicate with God directly. What does that mean? Basically, because of the idea people have of God and what we can infer from the way that study that produced that was worded, about 28% of people believe they can communicate with otherworldly sources directly. That is a large percentage of people. I want to note a minority can be large. And that number is too high to correlate with people who might have some sort of illness or whatever that would make them misperceive information. When that many people, according to a secularly derived survey, believe they can contact spirit, and when there is so much historical information, and I'll just use the word for simplicity's sake, tradition, stating that spirits exist and can be contacted by human beings, why are you there assuming that spirits do not exist? Thank you. Anyway, let me take a break and then we'll have the remontada. Abum shoo shoo kaka, abum shoo shoo baba, abum shoo amadeo ha, abum shoo shoo papa. Oh man. I think the remontada can begin now. You see, I'm experimenting with and improving with my idea communication style and finding new methods. You see, life and the spirit work hand in hand, but that doesn't mean they're exactly the same. In fact, they can be very different. You see, one's best complement is usually very different to them in key ways. But because they're a complement, they unite in key ways. You see, what I gave you before was the spirit. Let me give you the life of my message now. You see, the life of my message is, I'm the victim of injustice. I've talked about it before, and I'll be honest. A lot of that injustice was spiritual, but it has a physical component. some of it makes it hard for me to talk about that, you see. Because literally I feel physically unwell. I can't complete the thought. I can't get it out. But if you've heard me talk about it before and seen what I've said before, it's easy to see on a physical level how that can happen. And we all know of people who take time to talk about trauma. A lot of the trauma I'm talking about involved people telling me they did not believe what I was saying. This hurt me on two levels. One, based on what I had presented, it was not logical for them to say they just didn't believe. I didn't ask them to blindly believe everything I was saying. I asked them of two things. One, investigate what I'm saying. What I gave them had enough uku. It had enough ihe. It had enough grounding for them to investigate. And two, I asked them to look at the root of my message. The root of my message, in these instances I'm talking about, is that I needed urgent physical help. Physical, I want to emphasize. As in, I needed a physical place to stay, and also I needed physical health care. I needed food for the body. So I was hoping, like a normal person, that they would come in to help me physically quickly and then look at the overall larger abuse that had occurred. They did neither. Or they were not able to do so completely. And I want to emphasize, there are people who helped me but were not able to help me perfectly. And some of those people were not able to help me perfectly due to means outside of their control. At the same time, it was still hurtful. And I'll leave it at that. What am I saying here? I was dismissed openly because I added a spiritual component to my story. But I want to emphasize, I also gave physical information to ground what I was saying. So it was hurtful because they just denied me personally. But secondly, a lot of these people I believed were lying. What am I saying? You see, when people are very inconsistent, you see, I've talked about before what I talk about closet atheists. What am I really talking about there? I'm really talking about liars. You see, lies happen on many levels. There's conscious and subconscious lying, and there's also what is known as the lie that no one can really prove is a lie unless they just get real. What am I saying? If you see someone who goes to mass every week, but then when you say, hey, I think someone did something bad that had a spiritual component, and they say, I don't know, that doesn't make sense because secularism says it's wrong. That is a liar. The problem is society's standard today has said that that lie is what you should do, at least in many circles. So in order to call out that lie, you have to do what I call get real. You just have to say, we need a new society. A lot of people are afraid to do that, so they allow that lie to explode. When this kind of lying goes everywhere, you have situations like what I'm describing, where either no one calls out the lie, or in my case, well, here we go. I did two things. Some people I had mercy on with the lying. I didn't call it out. At least not the way I wish to. And then there are other cases where I called out the lie, at least to an extent, and because I was the only one saying it, I was not given support, and I'll leave it at that. These are very painful situations. And this causes a knock-on effect in our society, where because one cult determined that some information was not valid, it was not used properly when disseminated to the masses. What am I saying? Information is not able to reach its end goal unless the people are able to evaluate it. But that does not mean the people make it true. And you have to understand what I'm saying. It's not enough just for the truth to be seen. It must be acted upon. oftentimes the truth is not acted upon. There are two reasons I want to highlight for this. One, people expect to be able to marry the truth, and that's what I'll call it, as in they want the truth to be 100% comprehensible to them. That is not necessary. You just need to understand enough of the truth to go. If somebody says, hey, I was injured, gives you 5 pieces of evidence, do not leave them in squalor because you can only understand 3 pieces of evidence. If they've given you 3 pieces of evidence that they were injured, call for the emergency services. Do not leave them in squalor. That is an act of evil. But we have a culture where people say, if this truth does not look perfect to me, I must abandon it. And that is because everyone wants to believe they're perfect. And they're so wedded to the ideas that enter their mind that they think if they say that idea is not true, they've devalued themselves. That is not true. So that is the first reason that people do not fully evaluate the truth. And I'll be honest, maybe I'm going to leave it at that because I'm getting a little tired. I forgot what the second reason was. But again, this is a rough draft. Another example of what I'm saying. You expect the truth to come out perfectly, especially in an emergency. I think a lot of this is because people watch too many fictional stories. If someone has been the victim of an act of evil, they're not going to be at their peak. Why would they then deliver information at their peak? And then there's another disturbing trend I've seen. I've seen it in my case, and I've also seen it in general. People operate, whether or not they know it or whether or not they want to admit it, as if the person who gives the inconvenient truth will perish the next day. And because of that, they shrug and they wait for the celebration of life. Life continues. If a righteous person is injured, they will come back stronger. Thank you very much. Again, I still need food. You know how to help. See you next time.